Hey guys, as we wind down tonight, we travel to the vast empire of Persia, a place of sand-colored stone, its forgotten footsteps, and duties that stretch longer than the horizon. You're standing at a gate. Not just any gate. The gate. It's the one that marks the edge of power and the beginning of nowhere. Behind you, an empire hums with ceremony. In front of you, silence and wind. And you're stuck in between, alert, sunburned, and not nearly paid enough for the amount of staring involved. You might think guarding a gate sounds simple, maybe even noble. You'd be wrong on both counts. It's long hours, dust in places dust should never be, and the looming threat of something going very wrong, just as you begin to feel comfortable. So, before you settle in, feel free to give the video a like and hit subscribe if you truly enjoying the journey. You can also leave a comment. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always a small wonder to see people tuning in from so many corners of the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that gentle hum in the background, and together, let's ease into tonight's story. Being a Persian gate guard sounds like it might carry a whiff of dignity. Imagine polished spears, carved stone arches, the occasional dramatic encounter with a foreign ambassador. Perhaps even a well-trained horse trotting by in slow motion. In reality, you're mostly sweating. You sweat through your tunic, through your sandals, through your pride. Your post is scenic in the way that a sun-bleached wall is scenic after 8 hours of staring at it. You expected alertness to mean noble vigilance. Instead, it's a game of spot the lizard and praying no one asks you for directions in a language you daren't speak. The heat rises from the stones like the breath of a tired god, and your job, quite simply, is to not pass out. Still, this post matters. Gate guards are more than decoration. You are the first face of the empire, which is unfortunate because your face currently looks like it lost a staring contest with the sun. You are one more body against chaos, positioned precisely where no one wants to be, where trouble might show up, but usually dose in tea until it does. And so begins your day. With dust, silence, and the creeping suspicion that everyone forgot you exist, you wake up with the taste of sand in your mouth, not because you were dreaming of dates and desserts, but because the wind crept in during the night and redecorated your entire sleeping area with a generous helping of powdered grit. You spit. It doesn't help. There's sand in your teeth and your nose, somewhere behind your eyeballs. You're not sure how it got there, but it's now part of your personal geography. You try to shake off the sleep, but sleep hangs on like a half-trained camel, stubborn and always slightly offended. The blanket you used was more ceremonial than functional, stiff from overuse and smelling faintly of goat, sweat, and whatever emotion fabric develops when it's never washed properly. Outside, the air is already warm. It's not hot, not yet, but warming up like a pot of slow-boiled regret. You're stationed at one of the outer gates of the Achaemenid Empire. Sounds prestigious, right? You imagined carved columns, marble paving, the occasional royal procession for ambience. What you actually have is a cracked stone platform, a wooden stool with 3 legs, and a sun-dried fig that someone left here 2 days ago. You don't eat it, you consider it, but you don't. Your uniform, if you can call it that, is a faded tunic cinched with a belt that's seen better dynasties. Your sandals flap like lazy fish with each step, and the spear you carry is technically sharpened. If you count one side being slightly less blunt than the other, you polish it with a cloth that used to be white. It is a sort of mournful beige. You stand. That's the job. Mostly, you stand. Occasionally, you pace. If you're feeling ambitious, you squint into the horizon as though you're expecting an army. But really, you read just bored and pretending to see something other than heat mirages and a suspiciously shaped bush. You imagined a gate would involve action, intrigue, maybe a suspicious merchant, a lost emissary, a dramatic moment where you get to say, "Halt." Who goes there and mean it? Instead, most people just nod, grunt, and walk past you as though you're a slightly decorative statue with allergies. The sun climbs. You thought it was already high. It was not. It keeps rising, indifferent to your suffering, turning the stone under your feet into a sort of slow-cooking griddle. You shuffle occasionally to avoid grilling your heels. It doesn't help. There's no shade. The last soldier who leaned against the gate column accidentally pulled down a wasp nest and now trains pigeons in the capital. You do not lean. By midday, your water skin is more skin than water. You sip what remains. It tastes like yesterday's leather and disappointment. You expected relief? Instead, you get damp lips and the memory of hydration. The wind picks up, but not in a refreshing way. More like 1,000 small, dry slaps to the face. You pull your scarf higher, sand. Again, of course. And so you stand. Because that's what a Persian gate guard does. He stands. He stares. Occasionally he blinks. When his shift ends, he gets to walk home. Through the same dust, with the same grit in his socks. And the same thought, circling endlessly in his sun-baked head. Maybe tomorrow will be different. It won't. You were promised dignity. What you got was an outfit that appears to have been sewn by someone holding a grudge against the human body. The tunic scratches. Not gently, like a warning, but persistently, like it's trying to file you down. It clings where it shouldn't, flaps where you don't want it to, and somehow manages to be both too thin for winter and too thick for summer, which is impressive in a cruel sort of way. The fabric smells like it used to be stored next to onions. Maybe it still is. Maybe you're the one now stored next to onions. The belt, if you can call it a belt, is a strip of leather so cracked it makes a noise when you bend. A sound somewhere between an old man sighing and a tree giving up. The sandals are worse. You expected sturdy, you got. It's floppy. They're held together with what looks like optimism and some questionable stitching. After 3 steps, one of them groans. After 5, you're limping slightly. But that's normal. It's practically part of the dress code. There's a helmet you didn't want a helmet. You especially didn't want this helmet. It's heavy, dented, and smells faintly of last week's guard, who is either very nervous or just extremely sweaty. It doesn't fit, it never has. You adjust it 5 times in 1 hour, then you give up. It slides over your eyes every time you bow. You think about wearing it anyway. Wait, you don't. Last week it gave you a headache so strong your ears rang for a day and a half. Instead, you tie your hair back with a string that used to belong to a tunic cuff and try to look purposeful. No one looks at you. Even the birds seem disinterested. There's no armor, you asked once. The commander laughed. You're not a warrior, he said. You're a symbol. Symbol of what? No one clarified. It's probably budget cuts. Your spear is mostly decorative. You're not supposed to actually use it unless something dramatic happens. And by the time something dramatic happens, it's usually too late for a dull stick to fix anything. The only part of your uniform that almost feels like it belongs is the sash. Deep blue, frayed at the ends, but it looks official. It catches the light sometimes. In that wistful way, dead leaves catch sunlight right before being crushed by someone's sandal. You take small pride in it, till the wind picks up and flips it into your face. Again, and again, and again. Maybe you thought you'd get armor. Or at least a clean tunic every 10 days. Maybe you thought the state would issue you something ceremonial, with gold trim and a fit that didn't make you walk like you re-hiding a rash. No. You get what everyone gets. A uniform that looks noble from a distance. Smells like despair up close, and feels like penance wrapped in wool. And when people pass through the gate, merchants, nobles, messengers, the occasional camel with more decoration than you, they nod to the gate, not to you. The gate has presence. You have dust. You stand there in your fading sash, with a spear that might be more useful as firewood, and try to look like part of the architecture. Because heaven forbid you blink too long and get reassigned to the stables. Again, time moves differently at the gate. Not slower, not faster, just wrong. It loops. It drips. It forgets itself and comes back wearing a different hour. You start your shift at sunrise, which sounds poetic until you realize it. It means waking up in darkness, fumbling for your sandals in a room that smells like sleep and stale bread, and trying not to knock over your neighbor who's still drooling into his shared blanket. You arrive just as the light begins to ooze over the hills like honey that's gone slightly off. You expect a golden glow. You get a pale smear of indifference. Take your post. Lean against the column lightly, respectfully, and the day begins. Doesn't, you're not sure. Morning is fine. Not good. Just tolerable. There's a coolness to the air. A kindness that suggests the sun hasn't fully made up its mind about ruining your life. You watch traders set up tents. You see a goat sneeze. That's the most exciting thing that happens before the second hour. Then comes the middle of the day. Time begins to stretch. Shadows shrink to nothing, and the sun stops moving. You check the sundial. Stares back at you like it's in on the joke. You blink. Still midday. You stretch your legs. Still midday. You count the bricks on the wall behind you for the third time and discover you've miscounted. Somehow that's the highlight of your afternoon. You try not to yawn, but you do, loudly. A passing officer glances at you. You snap to attention and pretend you were breathing deeply for health. He doesn't buy it. He also doesn't stop. No one ever really stops at your post. They just glide by, nod, or occasionally toss a comment like, "Hot one today," as though this observation is novel and not an insult to your current state of personal dehydration. You aren't allowed to sit. That's policy. There is a stool, but it's for decorative purposes. The last guard who used it was caught napping and now tends bean fields in the mountains. You consider sitting anyway. The sun lowers just enough to shine directly into your eyes. You squint. You try angling your body. You end up looking like someone practicing awkward interpretive dance with a spear. Someone walks past and asks the time. You say, "Still day." They nod, as though this explains something. Evening arrives not with grace, but with a sense of exhaustion. The light softens, and so do your legs. Your back has begun to hum, not hurt, just vibrate gently like it's whispering ancient curses. You shift your weight to the other foot, then back again. The cycle repeats. So do you. You're supposed to be relieved at sunset. It's the rule. But your replacement is late again. Maybe he's napping. Maybe he's been eaten by a lion. You wouldn't even be mad. Lions respect punctuality. The sun finally dips below the far hills like it's embarrassed. Darkness creeps in. You remain, watching, wondering if this day will end or just restart itself in slightly different lighting. Eventually, someone appears. You hand off the spear. No words. None needed, he knows, Time has no meaning here. It's only dust and the endless, unblinking wait. You were told the gate was the beating heart of the empire, a crossroads of culture, language, and politics. You imagined dignitaries in golden robes, scribes with scrolls the length of caravans, perhaps even dancers, priests, or the occasional tame leopard. What you get is mostly shouting. The first visitor of the morning is a merchant with more donkeys than sense. He insists one of the donkeys is nobility. You're not joking. He tries to wave a letter. You can't read it. You ask for the seal. There is none. You suggest he wait. He throws his arms in the air and begins a soliloquy in 3 languages, none of which you speak fluently, and at least one of which might be made up on the spot. You nod politely and gesture to the bench. There is no bench. He sits on a box of dates and begins muttering prayers or curses, hard to tell with date juice dripping onto a sandal. Then come the pilgrims, always tired, always barefoot, always asking for directions to places that have existed since the last dynasty. Collapsed under the weight of its own poetry, you try to help. You really do. But there are only so many ways to say that shrine was turned into a granary before it stops sounding respectful. Children run by, laughing, covered in dust and fig pulp. You're supposed to stop them if they try to sneak through. You don't. You've learned that nothing stops a child on a dare. Not walls, not gates. It's not existential fatigue. A noble woman passes on a litter, eyes forward, lips pursed. One of her attendants sneezes, and she throws him a look that could curdle goat milk. You nod. She does not acknowledge your existence. That's normal. Nobles don't greet guards. Guards don't expect humanity. Midday brings a man who smells like fermented honey and insists he is the son of a satrap. He might be. He might also be a wandering wine enthusiast with aspirations of delusion. He asks if you've seen the stars today. You tell him it's noon. He nods, as though you've proven his point. You're supposed to record who passes through. There's a scroll, a stylus, a wax seal. You never use them. Your handwriting is awful, and the last time you tried a goat ate half the list. Now you just memorize faces and grunt appropriately. There's an entire vocabulary of gate guard grunts. Upward for approval, downward for denial, sideways for not my problem, and the very special double grunt for someone else's jurisdiction. A man tries to smuggle in a box labeled sacred incense. It's fish. You don't ask why. You just grunt sideways and point toward the market. The smell lingers. For hours. Late in the day, a soldier from the northern garrison rides in. His armor is dented, his face covered in road dust, and his expression suggests he's been having conversations with his own horse. You step aside. He doesn't stop. He just mutters, "They'll come at dusk," and disappears inside the city like a punctuation mark with legs. You sigh. You spit dust. You go back to standing. The gate is quiet now. Till it isn't. Until the next visitor brings questions, complaints, or cucumbers. One time a man carried nothing but cucumbers. Still not sure why. You expected ceremony? Instead, you learned the ancient Persian truth. Everyone eventually ends up at the gate, confused, loud, and always 5 hours behind schedule. You didn't think the sun could get any worse. That was yesterday. Today, it's less a celestial body and more of a personal vendetta. It's not just hot, it's inquisitive. Crawling into your clothes, slipping under your scarf, prying into the soft spaces behind your knees and under your arms like a bureaucrat with something to prove. Your skin, a dried fruit with regrets. The one-stand parts are now a strange mosaic of burn, flake, and sheen. You stopped peeling it days ago. Now you just pretend it's armor. You try to find shade. You remember shade. It used to be a friend. The side of a building, a stray cloud, the kindness of an overhanging awning. But here, at the gate, there is no shade. There is only the idea of shade. It's usually followed by the cruel realization that you actually just standing next to a darker patch of wall that radiates heat like a philosophical oven. Someone once said the desert cools down at night. That's true. If you're in the desert, you're at a gate, which means you're surrounded by stone, which absorbs sunlight all day and then sighs it back out at you long after the sun disappears, like a hot plate of invisible regret. You used to wear a headscarf. Light linen, beige, practical. Got stolen by the wind. Twice, you stopped chasing it the second time when it landed in a camel trough and came out, smelling like fermented diplomacy. Now you tie a strip of fabric around your head like a rebellious scroll and hope it does indeed unravel at the worst moment. Like during a salute, rain doesn't happen. Or rather, it does. Once a year in the middle of a festival, when no one is prepared and the sky decides to dump 3 months' worth of emotional baggage in an afternoon. You weren't there, but you heard stories, flooded scroll rooms, soldiers crying over soggy shoes, a gatepost that developed a mysterious lean and was never the same again. Your hands are cracked, not in the rugged, heroic way, more like old pottery left in the sun too long. You rub oil into them when you can afford it. Mostly, you just ignore the ache and pretend it's character development. Someone passes by carrying an umbrella. You consider tackling them. You don't. You just stare with quiet longing. They do not share. You expected resilience. Instead, you're becoming a study in progressive dehydration. Your lips have forgotten what softness feels like. Your elbows are a different color now, a kind of philosophical gray. Your neck sweats in places you didn't know had pores. You pour a little water onto the back of your neck. It evaporates before it hits your collar. You try again. Same result. You laugh. It's not funny, but it passes the time. And that's the part no one tells you. Being a Persian gate guard isn't about defending walls. It's about surviving your own skin. One flake, one drop, one burnt freckle at a time. You stand in the sun. The sun stands in you. And neither of you is willing to blink first. They call it a break, but that word has no meaning here. Not in this job. Not at this gate. It's less of a break and more of a sanctioned Chuan stare interval where you re-allowed to gnaw on something vaguely edible, while maintaining the posture of someone who is still technically alert. Your rations are simple. That's the diplomatic term. The honest term is dry. Your daily meal consists of a dense barley cake that might have been fresh once, back when Cyrus still had knees. It's wrapped in cloth, folded in paper, and tastes like the ghost of bread that died before it had a purpose. You break it open with your fingers, or try to. It's not bread so much as masonry with ambition. You chip off a corner. It resists. You chew. It chews back. Your jaw gets a workout, which is good because it's the only exercise you've had today besides sweating and blinking. Inside, you hoped for something. A fig, maybe. A smear of goat cheese if the gods were smiling, and someone in the kitchen's miscounted. No, just more barley. Barley in texture. Barley in attitude. A bland, resolute kind of food that stares into your soul and dares you to enjoy it. There's a strip of dried meat, too. You're not sure which animal it came from. Salt on it burns your lips, which would be fine if your lips weren't already cracked like a riverbed in a moral fable. You suck on the edge of the meat anyway because it's that or taste the inside of your mouth for the 5th hour in a row. Your water skin still contains approximately half a mouthful of warm disappointment. You drink it, feels like something once intended to be liquid, now unsure of its identity. You wipe your mouth with your sleeve wipes back. Sometimes someone brings a stew pot around. It's called lentil surprise, though the only real surprise is how often there are no lentils. Mostly it's water, with things floating in it, possibly vegetables, possibly memories. You slurp it with the sort of reverence normally reserved for religious rituals or very good bribes. You pretend it fills you up. It doesn't. It just coats your tongue in a thin layer of regret. You consider trading rations. You did once. A fellow guard offered you his date. It was old, wrinkled, slightly fermented. You ate it anyway? For 3 hours afterward, you could taste time. There's no fire to warm your food, no time to sit. You eat standing up next to your post, like a statue someone forgot to finish carving. You're not supposed to speak during the break, officially, to maintain vigilance. Unofficially, because no one has anything left to say except choo-choo sigh. You once tried praying over your food, a short blessing. The bread cracked louder. You took it as a response, and so your break ends. With crumbs in your collar, salt in your teeth, and the knowledge that dinner will be the same. Or worse. But at least it's predictable. Predictability is the only seasoning you get. You resume your position. You adjust your belt. You pretend you're full. You'd think night would be a relief. That it would arrive gently, like a friend who brings cool air, soft stars, and the opportunity to rest your legs without judgment. That's adorable. In reality, night at the gate is just the day, but darker and louder in ways that shouldn't make sense. The sun disappears behind the hills like it's trying to sneak away without apologizing. The sky bruises slowly, purpling at the edges, and you feel your body uncoil just a little, until the wind picks up. It's not a soft breeze, not a lullaby. The kind of wind that makes the hairs on your arms consult one another in panic. You're not supposed to admit fear, not out loud, not even to yourself. But you do take a firmer grip on your spear, which you've started thinking of less as a weapon and more as a conversation starter for emergencies. Everything changes at night. The gate looks different, less like a checkpoint, more like a mouth. You keep expecting it to breathe. The desert stretches out into a soundless void, but then it's not soundless. There are noises. Some of them make sense. A jackal howling in the distance, the creak of wood settling, the mutter of a tired guard further down the post line. Others don't. There are whispers, not voices, not speech, just that soft, questioning kind of rustle, like someone flipping through scrolls a little too quickly, or a dry tongue brushing the idea of a word. You look, there's nothing. You listen, there's too much. Your torch flickers, even though there's no breeze. The flame wavers like it's rethinking its life choices. You hold it closer. It does not reassure you. The shadows it casts are lively, twitching, bending, performing a small play about existential unease. You hear footsteps once, just one set, crunching softly on gravel, but no one arrives. You tell yourself it was your own shifting weight. You don't believe it, but you repeat it in your head like a hymn until it loses meaning. An owl hoots nearby. It sounds sarcastic. There's a logbook for the night watch. You're supposed to mark anything unusual. You never write anything. You don't want the commander asking questions. You don't want to be reassigned. The last man who heard voices now tends gardens at a temple and speaks only in riddles about rocks. You whisper a short prayer to Ahura Mazda. You're not sure if it helps, but it gives your hands something to do while they stop shaking. Slightly, a shape flickers past the edge of the firelight, probably a dog. Possibly a god? You decide not to investigate. You've learned curiosity is a luxury for off-duty scribes and children too young to fear. You shift your weight. Again, your knees feel like they're arguing. Your back wants to revolt. Your neck has decided to vote for secession, and still you stand. Because the worst part of Night Watch isn't what you might see, it's what you won't. It's knowing that if something truly wrong happens, it will happen quietly behind you while you're blinking too slowly. Stare into the dark. The dark stares back. No one blinks. Inspection day arrives like a rumor with boots. You weren't warned. You never are. It just happens. One moment, you're scraping dried fig off your sash with a broken thumbnail. The next, someone is shouting about posture and protocol, and suddenly, you re-standing straighter than you have in months. Except now, your back hurts in a new place. The inspector is tall, not impressive tall, more like architectural tall, as though he was designed to make everyone else feel structurally flawed. His beard is trimmed. His robe is spotless. You suspect he's never stood in the same spot for 8 hours without blinking. You suspect his boots have never met honest dust. He approaches like thunder disguised as politeness. Every guard along the post line sucks in their stomach, wipes sweat with whatever cloth they haven't already destroyed, and tries to remember which direction to bow. Left, right. Down and to the side, with a hint of terrified hope. You bow. Slightly too low. Your helmet slips. You try to catch it. You don't. It clanks against the stone and rolls in a dignified circle before stopping at the inspector's foot. He doesn't smile. That would be human. He raises an eyebrow with the weight of an empire. You retrieve the helmet, refix it sideways, and pretend your ears weren't just scalded by humiliation. He inspects your spear. Of course he does. The spear is chipped, dull, and slightly sticky from when you used it to knock down a hornet nest last week. You'd hoped no one noticed. You were wrong. He runs a finger along the shaft, sniffs, and writes something in his ledger with the kind of slow judgment usually reserved for sentencing minor traitors. Then comes the uniform check. He tugs at your sash. Frayed, he pokes at your tunic. Stained, he sniffs near your shoulder. Unfortunate. You want to explain that the soap ran out last week? That the water cistern cracked? That your partner borrowed your good tunic and never returned it because he fell into a well? All of this is true. None of it matters. He circles. You can feel him thinking. It's loud. The kind of thinking that rearranges your sense of self-worth. Try to stand still, but your knee chooses this exact moment to tremble slightly. Like a leaf trying to file for early retirement. Finally, he nods. Not approval, not even acknowledgement. It's just a nod. Like a gate that swings open but still wishes it were closed. Then he walks away. You exhale. You hadn't realized you were holding your breath. You also hadn't realized your sandals had come untied, or that there was a small fig stuck to the back of your calf. Both of these become apparent as the officer disappears into the horizon like judgment on legs. Your fellow guard looks at you. You look at him. Neither of you speaks. You just slowly, silently begin brushing crumbs from your collar and try not to think about how long it will be until the next inspection. It could be a week. It could be tomorrow. The important thing is, you're never ready. There is no official news post, no bulletin board, no herald who stops by with scrolls and dramatic readings. What you get is gossip, raw, unfiltered, passed down through traders, soldiers, camel drivers, and one particularly unreliable man who only speaks in riddles involving pickled onions. The first rumor today comes with a caravan from the west. A bearded man with a belt full of bronze coins claims that Babylon has been swallowed by the Tigris. Not flooded, swallowed. You ask for clarification? He nods solemnly and mimes a city being gulped like a date pit. You note it mentally under probably untrue. Next comes a man on a donkey who insists a rebellion has broken out. Somewhere. Against someone. Possibly involving wheat. He's vague on the details, but very confident about the shouting. You thank him and mark this under, maybe. Then comes a camel. Not the rider. The camel is the messenger. It has a small tablet tied to its hump. The writing is smudged, water-stained, and smells like regret. You can only make out the words urgent, parsnips, and something that may or may not be sacrificial goat. You decide it's best not to follow up. You hear everything here, and none of it makes sense. The king is dead. No, he's married. No, he's married and dead. There's a new road being built through the Zagros Mountains. Or maybe they Regis flattening a hill so the satrap's mother can have a better view. You expected information. You expected to be part of the machine, the great administrative heart of the empire. Instead, you're a sieve. Everything pours through you, but nothing stays. You pass messages from travelers to merchants, from officers to strangers, and then forget who said what or why any of it mattered. The guards at the next post over claim to have seen a god, or a man dressed like one. He offered them raisins. No one knows what that means, but they haven't stopped talking about it for 3 days. You also hear about a feast happening in Persepolis, a kind with pomegranates, honey-roasted lamb, dancers, and wine, poured from jugs shaped like lions. You are not invited. Of course you're not. The only feast you've had recently involved a slightly underripe melon and a handful of salt. Still, imagining it passes the time. Sometimes you try to confirm stories. Passing soldier tells you the satrap is inspecting roads. The next says the satrap has gout. Third says the satrap is missing entirely and has been replaced by his brother, who may be a goat in disguise. At this point, you've stopped trying. One day, a boy runs by shouting about war. You chase him down, ask for details. He shrugs and says, "It just sounded dramatic." He's 7. His job is to sell sesame cakes. He resumes shouting anyway. Consider making a scroll to document all the nonsense, but then what? You'd have to read it. And reading these days feels like swallowing sand. Dry, pointless, and full of errors. So instead, you nod at rumors, smile at nonsense, and repeat what sounds least implausible. Because that's your other job, not just to guard the gate, but to filter the Empire's noise into something that sounds slightly like truth. You fail often. But failure, at least, is consistent. We're told there was upward mobility. That if you stood straight, stayed quiet, saluted on time, and didn't accidentally insult anyone with jewelry, someone might notice. So that eventually, your loyalty would earn you a better post, a better tunic, position indoors perhaps, one with chairs. That was 12 seasons ago. You are still here, still at this gate, still holding the same spear, which now has your thumb and dent permanently pressed into the shaft. The wood is smooth in one place. The place you grip when you rethinking too hard and pretending that time has in tea become a flavor you no longer taste. You asked once, gently, carefully, about promotion. The officer at the time smiled, which was already suspicious, and said, "Just keep standing. He's gone now, promoted. Probably to somewhere with cushions." They don't promote gate guards. Not really. They just rotate you. Sometimes you're moved to the southern post where the wind smells like olives and despair. Sometimes you get sent to the east wall where nothing ever happens, and yet somehow everything still goes wrong. You think about retirement. Not often. It's like thinking about unicorns or solid stool. Pleasant but delusional. Retired guards don't exist. They just ... vanish. One day a guard doesn't show up, and the replacement is told he transferred. No one asks where. You imagine one of them started a farm? Dates maybe? Or beans? You hope there's somewhere with shade. Somewhere where standing is not a full-time profession. It doesn't matter. The officer calls you guard. The scribe refers to you as post 3. The cook just grunts when you walk by. Sometimes a child throws a stone and yells something you think is your name, or a curse. Honestly, both sound the same after a while. You once carved your name into the back of your spear, just above the grip. Small letters faded now, but it's there. You're not sure why. Maybe it was hope. Maybe you just wanted something to prove you weren't always dust. No one visits gate guards. Not family, not friends. Not anyone who smells like bathwater and choices. Your shift ends, you go back to your shared quarters, where the air smells like old sandals and resigned farts, and you sleep until the trumpet calls you to do it again. You thought maybe, just maybe, someone would write about you. A historian, a poet. Someone who saw you in your moment of standing glory and thought that man stood extremely well. But poets don't write about gate guards. They write about kings, about battles, about the kind of people who ride horses, not the ones who check them for contraband. So you remain, you keep your post. You nod when nodded to, grunt when necessary, and stand like a monument no one asked for. Maybe, just maybe, one day someone will find your spear, the one with the name scratched into the wood, and wonder who you were. They won't know. But at least for a moment, they'll have to admit. Someone stood here once. You don't see her? Not really? Not at first? That's the rule. You're not supposed to look. Queens in the Achaemenid court move like thoughts you're not allowed to have. Present, powerful, and absolutely forbidden. You know she passed because the air behind her smells like something expensive and dangerous, like saffron and blood oranges, with a hint of quiet revenge. No one tells you this outright, of course. But the court has its own language, made entirely of silence, glances, and knees that know when to bend. You learn quickly. Or you get reassigned to counting grain shipments in the outer provinces. No one survives that with dignity. Queen Parysatis isn't what you expected. You'd imagine someone veiled, soft-voiced, draped in jewels like a statue designed by rumor. Instead, she walks like someone who doesn't tea-trip, ever, and whose sandals would never dare squeak. You thought Queen sat still. She does not. She appears. She disappears. She reappears where she wasn't supposed to be, listening from shadows, stepping through curtains, pausing just long enough to ruin someone's week. One of the scribes once whispered too loudly that her eyes saw more than the king's throne. You haven't seen him since. He might still be alive. Possibly working in the archives now, cataloging blank scrolls with names scratched off. When she enters a room, no one speaks. Not because she commands silence, but because sound feels inappropriate, like trying to sing over an earthquake. You bow instinctively, even if you're in a different room and only think she might be nearby. Her presence is a kind of gravity. People orbit her, carefully, strategically. With the same energy as mice circling a cat who happens to own the floor, the ceiling, and the concept of movement itself. You once watched her pause in front of a vase, just a vase. Plain, ceramic, slightly chipped. She tilted her head. No one breathed. The vase was gone by morning. So was the servant assigned to dust it. She never yells. That's the terrifying part. She speaks softly, like silk sliding across a table just before it wraps around your neck. When she smiles, it feels like a trap closing. Beautifully. You expected the king to be the voice of the court. He is sometimes. But his voice echoes in public, or settles in hallways, in kitchens, in the slow blink of a guard who suddenly feels very watched. There's a story. You hear it often, though no one claims to have been there. She once corrected a general's battle report. From memory, quoted the casualty numbers, corrected the river's name, and mentioned the exact time of sunset during the retreat. The general thanked her. He didn't return the next season. You're not supposed to notice her, but you do. You always do. Even when you think you don't. Even when she isn't there. You see it once. The smile. Quick, tight, and shaped like something made out of polished bronze rather than joy. It's not aimed at you, of course. Nothing ever is. It's for a satrap who just told a very long story about supply lines. Everyone chuckles. The queen does not. She just smiles. The kind of smile that makes your stomach remember it left the stove on. There is a phrase used among the guards when someone disappears. She smiled at him. That's all they say. It's enough. You were told that queens bless festivals, wave from balconies, maybe sponsor a temple or two. What you weren't told is that Queen Parysatis plays court like a musician plays a harp. Gently, precisely, and with the full understanding that one wrong note can make an entire banquet hall choke on its own pheasant. She smiles again at dinner. Across the table, after someone misquotes the Avesta, not enough to correct him, just enough to ensure someone else will. The next morning, he's been reassigned to logistical oversight in a territory that hasn't had a road in 3 decades. You try to decode her? Everyone does. Lifted eyebrow could mean death, or delight, or just boredom with the wine. No one knows, and no one dares ask. You start watching the people around her instead. How they shift. How they laugh too loudly at something she didn't say. How they cough into their sleeves when she's thinking. Once, she smiles at a child. A visiting noble's daughter, young enough to still believe in safety. The girl beams back. It's genuine. Parysatis reaches forward and gently tucks a loose strand of hair behind the girl's ear. You nearly faint from the tension. Nothing happens. Nothing visible. But 2 days later, that noble's estate is mysteriously reassessed for tax irregularities. You draw your own conclusions. The thing about her smile is that it's never paired with warmth. No blush, no giggle, no softening around the eyes. It's an instrument, not an emotion. Sharpened over years of watching men believe they were in charge. You expected softness. Maybe serenity. What you get is composure that could cut glass. It's the smile of someone who has waited patiently through 10 reigns for assassinations. And the rise and fall of courtiers who thought poetry could protect them. She smiles, and it's not a performance. It's punctuation. She smiles when the wine runs out. She smiles when the general stumbles. She smiles when someone else is offered more figs than she is. The figs go uneaten. Someone asks once, what makes her smile? The steward says things that work out, and he adds under his breath, Things that work out for her. Try not to think about it, but the truth is simple. In the court of Parysatis, a smile isn't a reward, it's a mirror. And if you're foolish enough to see approval in it, you're already one step closer to being erased from next season's guest list. And possibly the records. It starts with embroidery. That's how they talk about her when they want to sound polite. The queen is at her needlework. Someone will whisper, as though she's tucked in a corner somewhere, sewing ducks onto a cushion. You've never seen her hold a cushion? You doubt cushions exist in her world. What she embroiders is policy. Letters, mostly. Messages to satraps. Corrections to grain tallies. Suggestions to the king, although suggestion in this context means something closer to quiet command with the shape of a compliment. She signs them herself. With ink so dark it might as well be night poured into a sentence. You once saw a courier run from her chambers to the stables. Not walk, run. He didn't look back. No one asked what he was carrying, they knew. A thread pulled just right, and someone far away was about to unravel. She keeps a needle case. Gold inlaid with lapis. Not because she uses it, not often, but because people talk when they see it. One story claims she once pricked her own finger and predicted a famine. Another says she sewed a secret message into a nobleman's sleeve, and he only found out when his coat was used as evidence at his trial. He was hanged or promoted. Depends on who you ask. You expected the sword to be the weapon of power, but the court is a different battlefield. Here, the deadliest weapons are the ones wrapped in silk. A pause, a word, a letter sent at exactly the right time or the wrong one, depending on the desired effect. There's talk that she advises the king in bed, not with whispers, but with strategies, about she's the mind behind half the marriages in the court and 3/4 of the tax reforms, that she once orchestrated a border treaty while pretending to argue about banquet seating. You can't prove any of it. You wouldn't try. But it's not hard to notice that when she lifts a finger, things tend to move. When she lifts a brow, they vanish. And when she lifts a pen, entire provinces tremble. You see her once, near the palace garden. She's alone, or appears to be. That already feels suspicious. It's threading something through cloth. Pale fabric, precise movements. You don't stare. You glance once, then forever carry the image of those fingers stitching something invisible into the empire. She doesn't look up. She doesn't need to. Someone tells you later she's planning a wedding, or a war, or both. The line is blurry. In her world, strategy wears perfume. You expected softness and power. You get precision. You expected noise. Get threads, pulling quietly, until the entire tapestry shifts and no one can prove how it happened. You never see her draw a blade. But that doesn't matter. She doesn't have to. She's already drawn the map, the motive, and the letter that will sign your replacement. And she's already finished the hymn. You think loyalty is rewarded? That's what they told you when you joined service. Serve well, and you rise. I'll be faithful. And you're protected. But in Parysatis' court, the faithful are kept close, not for trust, but for convenience. Like a well-sharpened knife, stored just slightly too close to the fruit. Her allies aren't friends. They're chess pieces. Carefully placed, occasionally sacrificed, never sentimental. You see them walk beside her in the gardens, nodding with the enthusiasm of someone being slowly boiled in compliments. Later you see those same faces pale with realization. They've been promoted sideways. Their new title sounds impressive, but their job is now in a province known mostly for camels and sandstorms that eat maps. She once elevated a rival publicly, grandly, with incense and a speech about wisdom and shared power. The court clapped. The musicians played. The kitchens roasted an entire ox. And by the next moon, he'd been assigned to lead a committee so complex, no one remembered what it was for. He was last seen mumbling about grain measurements and regretting everything. You thought keeping enemies close meant suspicion. Here it means bureaucracy. Endless titles. Tasks that involve 9 scrolls, 3 scribes, and a stamp no one's seen since the reign of Darius the Confused. It's not exile. It's paperwork that feels like drowning slowly while wearing gold. You notice something strange. Her enemies vanish less often than her allies. Those who oppose her, openly or quietly, tend to survive, if only barely. They are humiliated, delayed, assigned obscure positions with names like advisor of provincial overlap. But they're still breathing, still part of the game, because removal is final. But misery? Misery sends a message. You overhear two officials whispering. She feeds her rivals just enough to keep them hungry, one says. The other nods. And keeps her favorites just close enough to see the edge of the knife. Someone new arrives at court. A general's cousin, promoted quickly, too quickly. He smiles too much, laughs too loud. Within days, his requests are delayed, his servants reassigned, and his quarters moved 3 times. No one speaks to him at dinner. You watch him shrink, like bread left too long in the sun. Then one day, he smiles less. He laughs into his cup. He joins the orchestra of silence. And yet, none of this is written down. You'll find no record of her ever punishing anyone directly. No exile order, no execution notice. Just movements, assignments, shifts in position, a new advisory board, created for balance and consultation. You expected daggers, you get promotions with invisible strings. You expected vengeance. You get titles that taste like ash. She speaks kindly to everyone, especially to those she's already decided will fail. That's the art of her rule. Not destruction, but erosion. A slow wearing down of pride, position, and memory, until all that's left is a name on a scroll that no one dares read aloud. You ask a veteran scribe how to survive in her court. He smiles. Don't rise too quickly. Don't resist too loudly, and never accept a new title without reading the fine print. Twice. There's a banquet tonight. You're not invited? Of course not. You're never invited. But you're stationed nearby, close enough to see the flicker of golden lamp oil on polished plates. Close enough to smell the roasted lamb and honeyed nuts. Close enough to know that somewhere in the middle of all that luxury, someone will leave feeling unwell. You've learned that court banquets are less about eating and more about appearing to eat. The truly powerful never finish there. Food, they nibble, they smile. They arrange figs on their plate like symbolic gestures. Because at the banquet table of Queen Parysatis, every bite is a test, and every dish could be a lesson with sauce. She sits near the center, of course not quite next to the king, but close enough to lean in with an observation that feels like silk and lands like thunder. She eats little. She never takes the first bite. Never the second either. She waits. Watches. Then chooses something small and insignificant looking. A date. Nut. A sliver of quince. And eats it with the kind of precision normally reserved for surgery. You expected banquets to be noisy. They are, but only from a distance. The laughter is too loud. The clapping too quick. It's nervous joy. It's the kind you hear from people who know they've survived so far and are now chewing carefully, as if the almonds might explode. There's always wine. So much wine. But you'll notice that her cup is refilled often and rarely. Touched. It's a performance. A cup lifted, a sip feigned, a smile flashed. She controls the rhythm of the table without ever raising her voice. You once saw a noblewoman faint after dessert, just collapse gently into her napkin like a curtain. Deciding it had seen enough, no one moved, not for a moment. Then the queen stood slowly, gracefully, and announced that the evening had been delightful. The next day, the woman recovered, but she never attended another banquet. Poison isn't common. That's what they tell you. It's discouraged. But there's always talk. A powdered fig seed, a tampered honey glaze, a servant who forgot which cup belonged to whom. The food tasters do their work, but their eyes are tired, occasionally missing. You expect someone to choke, or die dramatically into a bowl of stew. That's not how it happens. What you get is a slow wince, a flushed cheek, a too long pause before laughter resumes. Sometimes it's just indigestion. Sometimes it's exile in 3 days. You watch courtiers rearrange their meals like chessboards. They trade dishes subtly, shift plates, smile with stiff teeth. They say things like, "You must try this." And no one ever does. She eats nothing from a shared dish, nothing handed directly to her. Her food is brought separately, arranged carefully. Always served by the same silent-faced steward who hasn't blinked since the spring rains. And you? You eat your ration crusts behind the pillar. You chew them slowly, not because you're savoring, but because they're dry enough to file documents with, and because for all their blandness, at least you know what's in them. You expected banquets to be a celebration, but here, it's their survival with candles and soft music. You keep trying to understand the court, so that's your first mistake. You thought it would be a place, walls, doors, named rooms, predictable people, but it isn't. It's a condition. Kind of atmospheric pressure that sits behind your eyes and whispers. Don't say that out loud. It changes every day, sometimes every hour. In Queen Parysatis, she is the gust that resets the direction of all the falling leaves. You never know what version of the court you'll wake up to. Is today the formal court? Then polish your sandals and forget how to blink. Is today the casual one? Then loosen your sash, but not too much, or someone will assume you're signaling dissent or indigestion. She doesn't lead from the throne. She leads by tilt of head, of gesture, of implication. The king issues edicts. She adjusts them mid-air with 3 words and a look that makes seasoned generals stammer like they've swallowed. A scroll sideways. Once the court decided red was the favored color. The next day, Parysatis wore blue. By afternoon, the entire court resembled a lake in silk. Even the peacocks were confused. You thought policy came from discussion? It does in theory. In practice, it comes from whatever she said in the hallway. To a servant who whispered it to a priest who interpreted it to mean that the grain tax should now be counted in half measures, and so it is. There's a rhythm to it all. Like a dance with no music, only glances. Courtiers rotate around her. Never too close, never too far. If someone edges inward, another must step back or disappear entirely. The geometry is ruthless. You hear people say things like, "The queen is in a good mood today." You look up. The clouds haven't moved, but somehow the temperature of the entire building feels different. Warmer, colder, it doesn't matter. It's not about weather, it's about her being weather. You once saw a man walk into court with confidence. He left with a different haircut and the sudden desire to study law far away. He hadn't even spoken to her, but he'd laughed at the wrong time, and that was enough to shift his entire forecast. You expected stability. What you get is atmospheric turbulence wrapped in gold thread. The whispers say she has informants, not spies. That would be crude. No, her informants are rumors themselves. They don't report. They arrive. They flutter through the palace, take the form of casual remarks, and mysteriously align with her opinions. One day the court bans a certain type of sandal. No one explains why. But you remember the week before, a courtier wore them and was caught adjusting his robes while she was speaking. That's how fast the climate shifts. And you watch it all from the edge where it's slightly safer. You track the movements like a fisherman tracks winds. Eyes on the curtains, ears on the tone, heart praying for a still day. Because in the court of Parysatis, survival doesn't depend on loyalty or intelligence. It depends on knowing which way the wind is blowing and never ever letting it see you sweat. At some point, you convince yourself that everyone in the palace must sleep. That even Queen Parysatis, for all her poise and precision, must lie down, close her eyes, and surrender her mind to the kind of dreams that make you kick off your blanket at 2 a.m. But the problem is, no one's ever seen her do it. There are rumors, of course. That she sleeps in short bursts, that she naps, sitting upright, like a statue, too important to recline. That she walks through the halls at night and speaks softly to herself, or to the ghosts of courtiers who tried to surprise her, and now live as metaphors. You once served on the late watch near the inner gardens. It was silent, until it wasn't. You heard footsteps, measured, graceful, and entirely unhurried. like a poem strolling without an audience. You didn't see her, but the scent in the air changed. The flowers stood straighter. The guards stopped shifting. The torches flickered, but not from wind. You expected kings to rise early. They do. Or they pretend to. But she's always ahead. The palace steward once joked that she sends instructions before the sun has remembered its purpose. He laughed, quietly, and looked over your shoulder. Every decree, every list of names, every perfectly phrased suggestion from her office arrives at dawn, folded, sealed, and already too late to argue with. She's done the math, the metaphor, and the messaging before you found your sandals. You tried to wait her out once. Not on Brutus. You were on duty during a storm, a real one, thunder and all. You stayed after your shift to monitor the inner corridor, just in case someone needed guidance. At the 7th hour, she passed by. Not startled. Not surprised. Just passing. As if the storm was something she allowed. She didn't acknowledge you. But your torch dimmed slightly when she went by, and your feet didn't warm again until morning. You thought maybe, if you rose earlier, you'd catch her leaving her chambers. But the chambermaids say she's always gone when they arrive. The steward says she never left. Someone's lying. Possibly everyone. Some believe she meditates instead of sleeping. Others think she reads the stars. You overheard a priest mutter that she speaks to Ahura Mazda more often than the fire does. Someone else said she is the fire. The point is, she's always ready. You expect fatigue to catch up with people. It doesn't. Not with her. She dreams with her eyes open. She rests. It's the kind of rest that ends other people's plans. You, meanwhile, sit with sand in. Your socks, half dreaming about bread and shade, and try to remember if you're still technically awake. She walks past, writing tomorrow into the present. And you blink too slowly. She's already 5 steps ahead. Your orders come from the king. Your salary is issued in his name. The banners on the palace walls bear his crest, and the songs in the garden mention his glory at least 3 times per verse. But every seasoned servant knows the truth. You serve the shadow of Queen Parysatis. You don't last long enough to sing about anything. The king is the face. She's the echo behind the face, the sound that lingers, shaping how everything is remembered. The king speaks, but somehow, his words always sound like something she might have suggested the night before. You once passed him in the hall. He nodded. You bowed. Simple, clear, expected. You passed her shadow once, projected onto a marble floor as she turned a corner. You stopped breathing for 3 seconds. That tells you everything. New scribes are always confused at first. They take notes during royal meetings, draft decrees, make copies. But eventually someone takes them aside and explains, what matters is the queen's pause. When she doesn't speak, take note. When she frowns at the parchment, start again. One scribe didn't listen. He drafted a tax proposal without vetting it through her steward. It's the draft returned. ... Edited. Every instance of increase. Now read decrees. And the last page smelled faintly of rosewater and warning. You thought power looked like a throne. Turns out it looks like someone adjusting a ring slowly, thoughtfully, while a satrap stumbles through his speech. She doesn't interrupt. She repositions. She doesn't object. She invites you to clarify a phrase that has led more men to ruin than open rebellion ever has. You once heard a military advisor walk out of a meeting pale and muttering. She asked me to elaborate. I've never felt such doom wrapped in such grace. Everyone learns to watch her shadow, not just the literal one, stretching out under torches and down-polished corridors, but the figurative one, the way people adjust when she isn't in the room, just in the concept. How decisions slow down until her opinion arrives, carried. By someone with careful syntax and damp palms, the guards whisper it, the king holds court. She holds continuity. You're not entirely sure what it means. But it feels true. One day you're assigned to a border post, and suddenly reassigned. Back, no reason given. You never find out what changed. Only that a letter was sent. Not from the king's office. From hers. A dry seal, folded page, a shift in fate. You expected to rise by serving the king. You rise by not misstepping in her presence or even in her absence. You don't win by being noticed. You survive by being useful, invisible, and aligned with her unspoken expectations, she once said.
Oh, really?
Or perhaps someone said she said, a true servant doesn't need orders. They move with the current, which would be poetic if the current didn't feel like a river shaped like her decisions. You serve the king, of course, officially. But in every hallway, with every bow, every cautious word, and every unopened letter, you know who decides whether your name remains ink or quietly fades from the scroll. You try not to say her name, not because it's forbidden, no one says that. There's no law, no decree, just a shared understanding that repeating Parysatis more than twice in a conversation is a little like ringing a bell in alliance. Then you don't know if she hears it, if you only know someone does. At first you're careless, everyone is. If you say it to a fellow guard in jest, maybe Parysatis herself will show up and fix the scheduling scrolls. He laughs. 3 days later, that same guard is transferred to oversee salt shipments in a district known primarily for its wind. Not the good kind. The kind that removes roofs. You start replacing her name with euphemisms. The queen, she, our presence and absence, that one with the excellent memory. Even these feel risky, if said with the wrong inflection. You hear a cook mutter. She prefers her lentils soft, and everyone in the room freezes. The lentils are remade. Some say the walls carry sound, that certain tapestries are lined with more than silk. You scoff, but not out loud. Scoffing is not the safest form of skepticism here. You once caught yourself mid-sentence. You were about to say, I heard Parysatis, but you paused, thought better. You coughed instead. The person you were speaking to nodded, as if to say wise move. You both stared at a column until the moment passed. There are birds in the garden, not the usual kind, stole-feathered, quiet. They perch on windowsills and listen to intently. You suspect at least one of them reports directly to her steward. The scribes talk in codes. They refer to her influence as the ink beneath the ink, as in, that plan has a lot of ink beneath the ink. You nod, pretending you understand. You don't. But you also don't want to ask because questions echo. Echoes are untrustworthy in these halls. One time someone called her by a nickname, a harmless one. Something like Little Fire. You don't remember the exact words, just that the laughter felt a little too easy. A little too loud. 2 days later, there was a silent banquet. No music. No wine, no reason given. Just silence, like a curtain that wouldn't rise. You expected gossip to be the main currency. It isn't. The real currency is discretion. The ability to finish a sentence in your head and let the second half remain in the air. Like an unopened letter no one wants to sign. You once watched a servant replace a scroll mid-copy. Not because it was wrong, but because the sentence structure felt too direct. She might take that as impatience, someone whispered. You expect fear to come with shouting, or at least punishment? But here it arrives as silence, a look, a name unspoken, a hallway that echoes back nothing, and so you adjust. You nod more, speak less, place pronouns with glances. And when someone says her name a third time in the same hour, you step away from them, slowly, like they've just declared war on fate with too much confidence. Because in this court, the walls don't just have ears, they have memory. Memory here belongs to her. You're transferred. It's sudden. A dry scroll arrives with your name on it. No explanation, no apology, just a new post in a quieter province known for figs, dust, and the slow decay of ambition. You bow to the courier. Doesn't meet your eyes. You expected to feel relief. The palace was too sharp, too clean, too full of people whispering with their eyebrows. Out here, the air is thicker, slower, and smells mostly of goat. The figs are fine. The dust is honest. No one curtsies at dinner, but you can't shake her. Not her presence exactly. More like the pattern she left behind, a rhythm you can't unlearn. You pause before speaking. You still lower your voice before naming someone powerful, even. When the most powerful person in town is a tax clerk who limps and forgets his own birthday, You keep expecting letters. Not from anyone in particular, just letters, folded just so, sealed in wax, containing instructions you didn't know you needed to follow. They don't come. But the feeling lingers like phantom parchment under your fingertips. You dream of her, not as herself, but as absence, as a missing chair at the edge of every thought. You once woke up convinced she had adjusted your bedding during the night, not because it was out of place, but because it was too perfect. The local governor asks you once, half joking, what it was like to serve near her. You smile. That's all a careful smile, the kind you learned under her eyes, the kind that says both everything and nothing. You thought distance would break her influence, that she was tied to rooms, to pillars, to corridors polished by the anxious feet of courtiers. But influence doesn't travel by horse, it travels by habit, and you carry it with you like a polished coin, hidden, warm, unspendable. A trader passes through one day, hauling linen and gossip. He mentions the queen briefly, says she's been quiet lately, that maybe her power is fading. You nod, you say nothing. But your left shoulder tenses slightly. And later that night, you check your bags. You don't know what for, just in case you expect to forget. But forgetting implies choice. Out here in the dry stillness, the world is slowed. But your thoughts haven't. When you negotiate with a merchant, you pause before accepting his terms, not because you need to, but because that's how she would have done it. You can't help it. You still think in terms of what she would approve of, or what she'd see without looking. It's not loyalty, not fear either. It's something stranger. It's a ghost that never died. A lesson that never stopped teaching itself. You left the palace. You left the marbled corridors and the silken rules. But you did not leave her, because no one does. You just shift to a quieter post, learn to live with the echo. You think ruins will feel empty, quiet, dead? But Persepolis doesn't die. It lingers, it settles, breathes, not loudly, but just enough to make you wonder if the wind is trying to tell you something in a language made of dust. You arrive. On foot, there's no ceremony, just the crunch of gravel, the slap of your own sandals against stone that's been waiting centuries for someone to notice it again. You expected grandeur. You get fragments. You expected echoes. You get silence that feels like it's been carefully edited. The first thing that hits you is the heat, not just overhead, underfoot. The stone holds on to the sun like it's still. Loyal to it, you try to find shade. There isn't any. The columns are too tall, too distant, too uninterested in helping. You wipe your forehead. The sweat is already gone, stolen by the air. The wind is dry and full of whispers, not voices, not memories. Just the soft hiss of time exhaling. You see stairs. Wide, shallow steps that once held the weight of kings, scribes, elephants, and tax collectors. You step on them carefully, like you're intruding. Because you are. Everywhere you look, the walls are talking, reliefs carved into stone, people frozen mid-bow, mid-gift, mid-gesture. Some faces are gone, worn by weather, or chipped away by hands with reasons. Others remain smooth and staring. You don't know their names, but they look at you like they remember yours. You came looking for ruins. You find patience, structures that didn't collapse, just sat down slowly and waited. You thought history would feel distant. Instead, it sticks to your skin like the grit behind your knees. You sit for a moment, not out of reverence, just because your legs ache. The stone beneath you is hot, unyielding. You shift. It does not. You try to imagine the city as it was. Banners, incense, petitioners lining the staircases with scrolls and sandals. But the silence is stronger than your imagination. There's a tablet nearby, not in stone, a modern one, signed for visitors. It talks about kings and architecture, victories and design. But it doesn't say anything about how it feels to breathe here, about the weight that sits behind your ribs, even though no one asked it to. You expect to feel awe. What you feel is smaller than awe. A kind of shrinking, like your thoughts have to crouch a little just to be allowed inside. You run your hand along a carved robe. The folds are shallow now, but still distinct. Someone spent days, maybe weeks, chipping that curve into permanence. And now it waits. Not to impress. It's just to persist. The sun moves. The wind shifts. A fig leaf rolls past your foot. You realize you haven't spoken in an hour. You realize you don't want to. Persepolis doesn't demand respect. It just doesn't care whether you bring it or not. You expected to see a place. What you see is time, sitting very still. They don't look steep, these stairs. It's the trick. They're broad, shallow, almost gentle, like they're inviting you up, just to watch what happens when you realize how far it really is, and you do climb, because you think it's just stairs. No. Because you think you're ready. You are not. Each step is barely the height of your ankle, but somehow each one takes more effort than it should. Your legs protest. Your lungs begin to second-guess your life choices. There's no handrail. Of course not. The ancients didn't care about your balance, your breath, or your knees. They cared about ascent, symbolic ascent, air, ceremonial ascent. And you, lucky visitor, get to relive that sacred journey with dust in your sandals and regret in your thighs. You pause halfway up. The wind is waiting there. Doesn't blow. It loiters. Dry, aloof, and full of the smell of old stone and older. Stories, you consider turning around. You don't. Because at this point, turning back feels more shameful than climbing past the point of comfort. The higher you go, the stranger it gets. Not louder, just larger. The space opens, but the silence deepens. Like you're ascending, into the absence of noise. There's no birdsong, no chatter, just your own breathing, which is getting more dramatic by the step. You thought you'd feel taller as you rose. You don't. You feel observed, not judged, not watched, just gently noticed, as though the stones themselves are filing you under minor intrusion. There are reliefs along the side walls, delegations bringing gifts, rows of men carved with meticulous beards and polite facial expressions. They aren't rushing, they aren't sweating. They didn't have to climb. You, meanwhile, are attempting. Diplomacy with your calf muscles. Someone once said these stairs were designed, so even the most burdened servant could climb them without stumbling. That may be true. But the designers didn't account for sunstroke, underhydration, and tourists who skipped breakfast. You try not to think about slipping. The thought arrives anyway, uninvited, vivid, wearing sandals just like yours. You adjust your footing and keep going. The sun doesn't feel hotter here, but it feels closer, as if the air has thinned in ways that no scroll prepared you for. You taste it in your breath, warm, thin, metallic with history, and then suddenly you reach the top. No fanfare, no welcome, just open space, a platform where once stood kings, guards, ambassadors, and accountants with sandals nicer than yours. You try to imagine the ceremonies, the incense, the bows, the carefully rehearsed flattery. But all you see is a flat expanse and the ghost of footsteps. Long brushed away, you expected revelation. You get perspective. You turn. You look back down the stairs you just climbed. You understand something strange. They were never designed to bring you up. They were designed to remind you how small you are coming back down. You come for the ruins, but it's the people who stay with you. It's not real people. Not anymore. The ones in the walls. The ones carved there, row after row, decade after decade, staring sideways forever. They are always in profile. That's the first thing you notice. No one meets your eye. Everyone is mid-step, mid-gift, mid-deference. You don't know their names. You don't know their voices. But they know what they were doing, and apparently they were doing it. With perfect posture and suspiciously tidy hair, you expect damage. You get detail. A lock of hair curls just so. A beard flows in decorative coils. Sandal strap wraps around an ankle that has been waiting 23 centuries to be admired. Again, someone carved this. Patiently, obsessively, possibly with too much free time and a chisel that told no lies. The stone doesn't feel warm, but it looks like it should. That's another trick. The people in these reliefs have a calm about them. Not indifference, exactly. Something more like practiced serenity. Like they've already lived through the fall of empires and decided it's not their problem. You try to count how many are on one wall, you lose track. Some have bowls, some carry animals. One carries a spear, but he looks more tired than threatening. Like a soldier whose greatest battle was just finding a place to sit down. They're not all from here. That much is clear. Clothes are different. Some wear caps, some wear ribbons, has a nose that looks like it could detect lies. They were ambassadors, emissaries, delegates from across the empire. You read that somewhere? But here in the wall, they're just participants in a ceremony that never ends. You reach out gently and touch one. You're not supposed to. There are signs. But curiosity is a poorly disciplined guard. The stone is rough, pitted. Not quite skin, but not quite dead either. You expect grandeur. You get endurance. There's a missing patch. A section where a face used to be, someone carved it out long ago. Why? No one agrees. Politics, probably. Now the ancient kind, which looks a lot like the modern kind. Except the tools were sharper, and the apologies came in the form of exile or poetry. Another face is partially erased by time. Wind, rain, maybe indifference. You stare at it. It stares at nothing. Both of you remain unsure whether this is reverence or just really persistent erosion. You think about leaving, but not yet, because even though they're made of stone, even though they've never moved, these carved people feel like the only ones in Persepolis who truly remember what it was for. Not kings, not soldiers, not you, just this quiet army of watchers who carried bowls, goats, spices, and the memory of 1,000 lost intentions, and still haven't blinked. There's no throne here, not anymore. You keep hearing about it from tablets, from signs, from wide-eyed tour scribes who point to a square of polished stone and say, "This is where the king sat." You squint, you tilt your head, you see. Floor. Maybe slightly shinier floor. It's maybe a faint indent shaped, vaguely like a rectangle that once mattered more than your entire family line. You expected a throne. What you get is a suggestion. A rumor with good posture. The kings used to sit here. Supposedly Darius Xerxes, Artaxerxes, names that sound like they were invented to be written on pillars. They received guests in gold-threaded silence. They issued decrees about taxes, war. And who got which horse? Now it's just sun and dust and the faint memory of authority pressed into rock like a sigh that forgot to echo. You stand where they stood, or where they might have. Or where someone might have thought they did once. The problem with ruins is that everything important has already left, and everything left behind pretends it's still important. You walk around the platform carefully, not because it's fragile, it's not, but because something about stepping where kings sat feels like asking for a very specific kind of ancient bad luck. The kind that arrives on sandals and whispers your errors into your dreams. A faded inscription nearby tells you this was the hall of 100 columns. You try to count. You lose track at 12. Some have fallen. Some are just stumps. Some rise. Into the sky like accusations with capitals. You run your hand along one, not the capital, just the base. It's wide enough to make you feel like a beetle with aspirations. The stone is smooth in some places, flaking in others. It's like history. Forgot whether it was polishing or erasing. You expect to feel royal. You feel thirsty. There's no shade here, just wide space and the suspicion that you're being measured by ghosts with clipboards. You find a spot and sit. It's not on the throne. That would be too bold. You sit beside it, or near it, or near the idea of it. You imagine the ceremonies, the incense, the translators, the trays of fruit no one touched, because everything had been taste tested twice and then blessed by someone with very clean hands. Someone coughs in the distance. A tourist, maybe, or a spirit, or both. You reach for your water skin. It's warm, slightly metallic, slightly disappointing. You drink anyway. From here, the view is oddly humbling. It's mountains in the distance, empty space in every direction. Think about what it means to build a throne this high, in a place this dry. What kind of confidence or fear drove a king to want his seat carved into stone and surrounded by 100 pillars like a forest made of command? You don't get the answer, just the outline. The stones are uneven. That's the first thing. Your feet tell you, not with words. Your feet stopped using language hours ago, but with the kind of internal groaning usually reserved for stairs and betrayal. You imagined a smooth promenade, a royal avenue, maybe even polished walkways, where philosophers once pondered tax codes. What you get are slabs. Hot. Slightly angled slabs that shift beneath your sandals like they're testing your commitment to memory. You didn't expect to spend this much time looking down. But if you don't, you'll trip over history. Literally. Some of these flagstones stick up like elbows. Some have eroded into shapes that resemble animal faces. One looks like it might bite back. You pause. Not for majesty, for blisters. There's no seating. None. The ancients didn't believe in benches, apparently. Or if they did, the benches are gone. Either stolen, turned into someone's garden furniture, or quietly eroded into invisibility. You sit on a wall, it's not really a wall. It's more like a ruin of a ruin. But it holds your weight, and that's enough. You expected to come here and learn something profound, but so far the deepest truth is that sandals were a mistake. You wonder what ancient courtiers wore on their feet. Something practical, probably. Something breathable. Something not held together by a single string, and misplaced. Optimism, you stand again. Slowly, the sun has warmed the soles of your shoes. Into soft pudding, you consider removing them. You do not. There are thorns and insects, and one very aggressive lizard watching you from a crack in the stone. You pass another staircase. It rises into nothing. Just 10 perfect steps that lead to a platform now used by birds and the occasional windstorm. You climb it anyway, because it's there. The view is the same. Ruins, columns, silence, sky, but from a slightly more judgmental angle. You think about the feet that walked here before yours? It's the diplomats, the guards, the water carriers, the anxious uncles with scrolls of dubious importance. You wonder if any of them limped by the end of the day. Probably. But they didn't write that part in stone. You see a faint carving near your foot? A pair of sandals. Not yours, not detailed. Just the ghost of tread marks in a forgotten slab. A joke, a tribute, a signature, you don't know, but you step around it, carefully, as if stepping on it might trigger some ancient bureaucratic ritual. That requires you to file taxes in Old Persian. You expect it to walk through history, but mostly, history walks through you, up your calves, into your knees, across your back like a reluctant pack mule hauling assumptions. You reach for your water again. It's hotter now. You drink it anyway, because dignity is a fantasy, and hydration is not. And as you limp across the last sun-split courtyard, your feet whisper the real legacy of Persepolis. No shade. No benches. No mercy. There are words carved into the stone. Thousands of them. Sentences etched with such care you'd think they were written by someone who believed time was listening. And maybe it was, but time doesn't translate. You run your fingers along a block of text, sun-bleached and pitted. Cuneiform, maybe. Or Old Persian. Or Elamite. Or all three stacked like a bureaucratic sandwich, none of which you can eat. You squint. You tilt your head. You pretend the shapes mean something. They don't. At least not to you. They look like the footprints of very organized ants marching into eternity. You expected insight. What you get is a wall politely ignoring your ignorance. The sign nearby tries to help. It offers a translation, official, tidy, distant. I am Darius, King of Kings, of the lands far and wide. You nod, but it doesn't quite feel like what the stone is saying.
Ow, the tone feels different.
The stone feels older than the words. On the sign, it feels like it's saying, I was here before titles had names. You look closer. Some of the letters are worn down, erased by centuries of wind and fingers and misplaced reverence. One phrase has been scratched out entirely, maybe by a conqueror or a courtier with regrets and a very sharp chisel. You didn't come here to read, but now you wish you could. You imagine some poor scribe hunched over a slab, carving with purpose and a cramping wrist, while his supervisor barked something about deadlines and proper spacing. The language is ceremonial, probably. Glorious deeds, epic battles, tax reforms, disguised as divine justice, the usual, but there's something almost tender about it. A quiet desperation to be remembered. Not just what was done, but that someone did it. That someone stood here once and believed that stone would remember what people wouldn't. You find another tablet tucked in shadow. The letters here are smaller, crammed together like they couldn't afford the real estate. Maybe it was a last-minute addition, a king's cousin, rebellious satrap who paid for his own paragraph. You try to pronounce a name out loud. It sounds wrong. Your tongue refuses to cooperate. You cough instead. The wind takes your syllable and blows it into a column crack, where it will probably echo for another century before anyone notices. You expected the words to explain something. They don't. Not directly. What they do is sit and wait, and remind you that writing, for all its power, is still just hope with sharper tools. A guide walks past with a group. He points at the wall and says something about greatness. His audience nods. One snaps a photo. The wall does not care. You trace one more letter with your finger. It's jagged now, faint, but still there. You don't know what it meant, but someone once did. Someone thought it was worth carving, and maybe that's the point. Because you didn't come here to read the past. You came here to realize it doesn't need your understanding to exist. You've heard the stories of fire, of Alexander, of a night full of smoke and vengeance and bad decisions. You came expecting char, scorch marks. It's the blackened bones of a fallen empire. But there's no fire here. Not anymore. At least stone that. Remembers too much and says too little. You walk the outer walls, scanning for clues. Bits of rubble, discolored patches. Anything that might say, yes, this is where it burned. What you find instead is wind, to clean, to polite. Already swept the past under a carpet you're not allowed to lift. They say it was a party, or a punishment, or both. A courtesan suggested it. King agreed. A torch found a curtain. And then everything imperial became everything flammable. You expect a crime scene. What you get is a silence so old it's grown smooth around the edges. There are scorch lines, supposedly, subtle ones, near the Hall of 32 Columns, or maybe it was the Treasury. The signs are vague. The maps disagree. You start to suspect the fire is less a fact and more a shared memory. Like everyone got together and decided to misremember the same event. You find one wall that feels warmer than it should. You place your palm on it theatrically. Nothing happens. No vision. No rush of ancient sorrow. Just a slightly uncomfortable hand. You expect ruins to speak loudly, as one mutters. A bird cries overhead, sharp echoing. You flinch. You pretend it didn't happen. They say Persepolis burned. For days, but there are no ashes left. The air smells of dust and stone and resignation. The fire is gone. The damage remains, but only in gaps. Columns that should be there but aren't. Doorways that now frame only sky. Rooms that echo without walls. You try to imagine the night it happened. A woman laughing. A wine cup dropped. A servant screaming something no one hears. And then the heat. The frantic hands. The choices. The regrets arriving too late and dressed in ceremony. But imagining it is like trying to remember a nightmare you never had. You get fragments. Without flame. Smoke without source. You sit on a half-fallen step. There's a breeze now, and it brushes your neck like an apology from someone who knows it won't help. You expected fire to leave a message. Instead, it left absence. It erased with precision. Not like a child with a sponge, but like a scribe. Striking out a line he regretted writing. You wonder if the fire was really the end, or just a long pause. After all, some of these stones still stand. Some of these carvings still smirk. You walk away from the ruined hall expecting closure. Get shadows. Long ones. Yours among them. They rise like questions. Dozens of them. Tall, ribbed, worn by wind, topped with strange shapes that used to mean something: lions, bulls, composite creatures who once held up roofs and metaphors in equal measure. You crane your neck, you squint, feel your balance shift slightly. Like your body realizes too late that the sky doesn't have a handrail. These columns don't just reach, they insist. And they do it with the confidence of someone who forgot how to be humble sometime in the 5th century BCE. You expect one to have fallen. Some have, of course. Not all. Not enough to ruin the illusion. Just enough to remind you that gravity has opinions. The ones still standing seem to defy logic. Thin at the base, fluted all the way up, somehow holding nothing, and still feeling important. You imagine them chatting among themselves at night, whispering about how tourists never look all the way up anymore. You try, you really do. But the sun is in your eyes and your neck is protesting with the vocabulary of an old man who's seen too. Many dynasties fall. You rest your hand against one. The grooves are deep, deeper than you expected. Someone carved these. Not a machine, not magic, a person, with time, with sweat. Probably with complaints. The stone is cold, despite the heat. It's a trick of depth or shadow, or the sheer stubbornness of ancient architecture. You keep your palm there a moment longer than you need to, just in case the column wants to say something back. It does. You move from one to another. Each is slightly different. Some lean, some chip. One has a crack that looks like a smile from someone who knows too much. You try not to read too much into that. There are carvings high above shapes you can barely make out. They were meant for gods, or kings on tall platforms, or at least people on horses. You, meanwhile, have dust in your sandal and a pebble. That's been negotiating terms with your heel for the past half hour. You expected the columns to be supportive. Instead, they're aloof. Not cruel, just distant. Like elders who've moved beyond speech, a guide walks by with a group of visitors. He points up and says something about symbolism, about strength, endurance, divine order. Hear half of it. The rest is lost in wind and your own internal monologue about whether you're becoming emotionally attached to vertical limestone. You take a step back and try to see the whole pattern. It's hard. The columns don't align the way your modern eyes want them to. They seem random, then suddenly deliberate, like someone planned it all but didn't feel the need to explain the joke. You expect them to reveal a secret. Don't they just stand? Not because they must, but because they still can. And somehow that feels like enough. You find a quiet spot. Not hard. Here. Everything's quiet, but this part, this corner past the broken staircase and the two leaning stones that look like they're about to argue. This place feels deliberately quiet. You sit, slowly, carefully. The ground is uneven, the dust is ambitious, and your legs have formed a silent rebellion. You expected to feel triumphant, perched on ancient remains, breathing the air once scented with royal oils. What you get is the sound of your own nose whistling and a breeze that smells faintly like lizard. It's not what you pictured. That's the running theme here. You close your eyes. Not to meditate, just to rest your pupils. They've been squinting since the second hour of sun. When you open them again, nothing has changed except you feel like something might have. The light's softer now, the shadows longer, the silence heavier. You hear something. A bird? No. A footstep. Also no. It's your heartbeat, slowed by stillness. Or boredom. Or the fact that you've walked 5 miles and had lunch that could be best described as fig-adjacent. You expected majesty to announce itself. Here, it just lingers. It doesn't arrive.
Oh.
It was never meant to arrive. It was. And now, it's still here, without trying to impress anyone. You notice a beetle crawling across the base of a wall. It doesn't care about history. It just wants shade. You relate. A nearby column creaks, or maybe your back does. Hard to tell. Either way, something ancient is complaining softly. A group of visitors passes in the distance. Ear murmurs. A laugh. A camera click. Then they're gone again, swallowed by the sun. You could follow them, but somehow you feel like this is the real tour. The part no one points out. The part without explanations. You run your hand across a carved edge. Smooth from centuries of other hands doing the same thing. Or maybe from rain or wind. Or reverent fingers and disrespectful ones. all doing the same motion with very different intentions. You expected to find something new. You find something unchanged. Something that doesn't care whether you understand it. And because of that, it lets you stay. There's a small, carved lion on the wall beside you. You almost missed it. Its face is worn into a kind of noble blur. It looks tired. Not defeated, just done. Performing. It no longer roars. It waits. For nothing in particular, you and the lion sit together for a while. You breathe. It doesn't. But still, the company is good. You take a long sip from your water pouch. Still warm. Still disappointing. But you drink anyway, because that's the rule of ruins. Discomfort is part of the immersion. You expected revelation. Stillness. And maybe that's enough. You tell yourself it's time to go. The sun agrees. It's lower now, dragging shadows across the courtyard like lazy brushstrokes. Your water's almost gone. Your sandals are one insult away from mutiny, and your legs are writing small and polite. Poems about everything they've endured today. Still, you don't move. You expected to feel done. Instead, you feel unfinished, like you've read most of the story but skipped a crucial footnote. You finally stand. Slowly, the ruins do not applaud. You begin the walk back. The same stones greet you in reverse, somehow less cooperative now. You thought the descent would be easier? It's not. The wind has changed direction, and now it's blowing regret directly into your eyes. You pass the same worn carvings. You nod at the same silent guardians. The beetle from earlier has vanished, presumably to start a religion somewhere in the shade. Dust clings to everything. Your clothes, your hands, your intentions. You try to wipe it off, but all you succeed in doing is moving it from one surface to another. It's not dirty. It's remembering, because that's the trick Persepolis plays. You come here expecting to witness memory, but instead, you become part of it. The dust knows your footprints now. The sun knows the shape of your shadow. The walls have heard the rhythm of your breath. And none of it is important. But none of it will be erased. You reach the outer path, where the signs start to reappear. Modern signs with arrows and fonts that pretend the past is neatly labeled. You follow them, but slowly. You look back once. The ruins don't wave. They don't shimmer. Just sit, same as they were, same as they'll be. You're the only thing moving. You expected to leave behind a place, but it's leaving you behind. Ah, bird cries from somewhere above. Not poetic, just hungry. A lizard darts between stones with more purpose than you've shown all day. You nod in admiration. You reach the edge. Beyond it, the modern world resumes. Cars, maps, people with places to be. You hesitate. Not because you want to stay, your feet would revolt, but because crossing that line feels like the end of something small and private. You take one last glance at the stones, at the columns, at the space where once there was fire. You try to memorize it. You fail. But the dust is already doing that job for you. You expected to visit Persepolis. You didn't expect it to visit you. And long after you've gone long, after your clothes are clean and your sandals finally give up and retire, a bit of that dust will still be tucked in your bag. Your shoes. Your memory, quiet, patient, unimpressed by your timeline. The first rule of court etiquette is this: bow early. Bow often. And if you're not sure whether to bow, you should already be halfway down. You practiced. You thought you had it. There's a certain angle, a certain depth, a certain pause before rising that signals deference but not desperation. But then you arrive, and everything collapses into performance anxiety with gold trim. The floor is polished, not reflective, just smug. It reminds you constantly that your sandals are dusty and your posture is provincial. You step forward. Too soon, you step back. Too obviously. Somewhere, someone exhales in a way that sounds like a correction. You expected to wait quietly. You do. But not in the peaceful, meditative way you imagined. You wait like a broom propped against a doorframe. Useful, but very much in the way. A steward passes. You bow. A courtier glides by. You bow lower. A child sneezes somewhere across the chamber, and you instinctively incline your head, just in case the sneeze held rank. You thought bowing would be straightforward. It is not. There are gradients. A shallow nod for lesser nobles, a deeper bend. For advisors, a full spine-folding reverence for royalty. And then there's the queen, for whom bowing is not just about angle, but about intention. She can apparently detect false humility by the speed of your ankle rotation. You practice again while no one is looking. You almost fall. A guard notices. His eyebrows raise. You bow at him too. It's a mess. Silence rules the hall, broken only by the subtle chaos of protocol. A wrong bow is worse than a wrong word. Too late bow is social heresy, and rising before being acknowledged. Unthinkable. One man did that last month. No one has seen him since. The official explanation was reassigned to vineyard duty. In the desert, you hear footsteps. Not yours. Not random. Important. You bow. It's too deep. You wobble. Recover. You keep your head down so long, your thoughts start to echo. Is this long enough? Is this too long? Has everyone left the room? Are you bowing to an empty chair? You peek. Just a glance. Steward sees. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. Feel the weight of his eyebrows pressing you back down. Time doesn't move the same here. Bowing feels like aging. Our knees. Whisper complaints. Your neck begins to hum. Somewhere nearby, someone is speaking in a language you don't understand. Somehow it still sounds like a warning. You expected grandeur. You get posture-induced paranoia. Eventually a gong sounds. Soft, ceremonial, somehow judgmental. It means you may rise. You do so in segments like an old tapestry being unrolled by a nervous archivist. No one claps. No one nods. But no one stops you either. It's considered success. You stand, sweaty, slightly bowed forever, wondering if your back will ever forgive you. It won't. They say silence is golden. At court, it's more than that. It's currency, armor, and alibi all at once. Words are dangerous here, not because of their content, but because of their existence. You open your mouth once, just once, to say something helpful, something harmless. A correction about the water schedule. A well-meant clarification. It doesn't matter. A nearby scribe winces. A nobleman frowns so gently it feels like you've been sentenced to something. No one responds. The silence wraps itself around your words like a soft blanket soaked in judgment. You expected conversation. You get choreography. People don't. Talk here. They place phrases like offerings, carefully, slowly, with the reverence of someone laying fruit before a stone that might be a god, or might be just a very judgmental rock. You try again later. A compliment this time, about the architecture. No one reacts. Then hours later, you notice your meal arrives cold. A coincidence? Maybe. But the steward makes eye contact a little too long for comfort. The bread has the texture of dried commentary. There's a rhythm to court speech. You are not part of it. Words are layered, folded, presented like silk, and you, unfortunately, are holed in burlap. A lord makes a joke at dinner, or something shaped like a joke. Everyone laughs 1 second too late. You do too, a beat too early. A nearby servant twitches. You spend the next hour wondering if that laugh cost you your next. Posting, you expected the danger to come from soldiers. Instead, it comes from your own tongue. The queen speaks rarely, and when she does, it's in sentences that leave space for interpretation, for fear, for a pause long enough to rethink your entire vocabulary. That is, interesting. She says, and 5 men lose sleep trying to figure out if they're being promoted or executed. Even the king speaks with caution, like a guest in his own echo chamber. He once said, "We are pleased," and 3 governors rewrote their budgets that night. Just in case, you begin to speak less, then even less, then not at all. Eventually, you nod with nuance. You raise your eyebrows with tactical precision. One day, someone praises your discretion. You nod again. You are now a master of the subtle, non-dash response. It feels safe. It feels cold. You expected power to be loud. You find it sitting quietly behind a closed mouth and a very, very patient stare. And the worst part, You start to enjoy it. You watch others stumble. You observe newcomers offer opinions like puppies handing over dead mice. You sip your tea and say nothing. The silence smiles on you. For now, but deep down, you remember, all it takes is one word. One misstep. One certainly said too soon. One perhaps that lingers a second too long. And you're no longer discreet. You're disturbing. So you say nothing. And everyone is very impressed by your wisdom. It starts with footsteps. Yours. You didn't think much of them before. Feet are feet. Walking is walking. But at court, even your ankles have expectations to meet. And yours, unfortunately, were not trained for diplomacy. You step into the grand hall, and everything becomes too loud. Not the room, your sandals. They slap the marble like a fish arguing with a plate. Too fast, too flat, too confident for your rank. But you try to slow down. Now you're creeping. Now you look suspicious. Now you're sweating. You expected clothing to matter. It does. But movement matters more. Nobles don't walk. They glide. Visors don't stroll. They sweep. Stewards appear to be carried by invisible logic. And you're auditioning for? A role as panicked goat number 2. There's a path you're supposed to follow. Not marked, not spoken, just known. Invisible lines of social geometry, the lanes of importance and invisibility. You cross one accidentally. A court musician stops playing for a half second. It's enough to ruin your week. You pass a tapestry. You're not supposed to look directly at it. You glance anyway. It's massive, gold-threaded, filled with stitched scenes of empire and balance. But the real test isn't how you admire it, it's how you don't trip on the rug beneath it. You barely pass. Someone coughs, not at you, but it might as well. B. You try to correct your gait. Less bounce, more glide. But now your arms feel weird. Are they swinging too much? Not enough? Should they be visible? You tuck them behind your back. Now you look like a guilty teacher. You let them hang. Now, you resemble a sleepwalker. There's a specific walk the nobles use when approaching the throne. 3 steps. Pause. 2 steps. Bow. 1 step. Full stillness. It's like a ritual invented by furniture. You watch someone do it flawlessly. A minor satrap, probably. His sandals barely whisper. His robes ripple like philosophical waterfalls. Hate him just a little? You try it. 3 steps. Pause. Your pause is too long. 2 more steps. You forget the bow. Someone behind you shifts their weight with meaningful disappointment. You expected to walk in and be unnoticed. Instead, you feel like the marble is taking notes. And of course, the queen sees everything. She's not watching you, not directly, but you can feel it. Like heat from a brazier you thought was decorative. Later, you hear someone compliment your modest cadence. You're not sure if it's a compliment or a warning. You nod. Carefully, you walk away slower this time. The wind doesn't catch your sleeves. Your sandals keep their opinions to themselves. You still don't know the right way to walk, but at least, for now, no one has asked you to stop. No one tells you what to do with your hands. That's the problem. They dangle. They twitch. They float awkwardly at your sides like underemployed attendants, unsure if they're still invited. You try folding them, that feels too religious. Try clasping them behind your back. Now you look like a criminal with good posture. You let them hang. And now they feel enormous. You expected eyes to betray people at court, but here it's the hands. Every gesture means something. Not because of what it is, but because of who you are. A raised palm can be a greeting, a dismissal, or a catastrophic. Misunderstanding, you scratch your nose. Steward winces. You reach to adjust your belt. Guard shifts his stance just slightly. You pretend it didn't happen. Your hand retreats like a soldier from a war it didn't mean to start. It gets worse. During ceremonies, the nobles place their hands just so, one hand crossed over the other. Fingers aligned like they're auditioning for a fresco. The king rests his on his knees, palms down like he owns gravity. The queen, well, she doesn't move her hands. Others move around them. You try mimicking what you see, folded, relaxed, dignified. But then your thumb twitches. and suddenly it looks like you're signaling a conspiracy about barley storage. At the meal, it becomes a game of silent panic. Do you reach for the bread before or after the satrap does? Do you use one hand or both? You tear off a piece? Loudly, crumbs scatter. One lands near the queen's sandal, doesn't bounce. It settles. You expected etiquette to be about rules, but here, it's about not being noticed. Your hands are very, very noticeable. You're handed a scroll. You panic. Which hand receives it? Which hand holds it? You unroll it now or wait? You choose wrong. A court scribe coughs. It's not a real cough. It's an etiquette cough. The most polite kind of insult. You try resting your hands in your sleeves, and you look like you're smuggling a pigeon. Someone tells you later, softly, kindly, in the tone used for scolding toddlers and diplomats, that your gestures were a bit expressive. You nod. You don't know what it means, but you vow never to move your fingers again without divine approval. Later, you watch a noblewoman communicate an entire philosophical position with 2 fingers and a half tilt of her wrist. You feel both. Awe and a sharp desire to hide your hands in a bucket. There's a carving in the hall. An ancient relief of a servant holding a bowl with perfect stillness. The fingers are delicate, intentional, almost too elegant for a living person. You stare at it for a long time. You try to copy the pose, your shoulder. Cramps immediately. You leave court that day with a new understanding. Power doesn't come from speech or presence or titles. It comes from knowing exactly where your fingers are. It's just a smile, at least. That's what you thought when you first arrived. Smiling is friendly. Smiling is polite. Smiling in most parts of the world is a good thing. But here in the shaded halls of the Achaemenid court, a smile is a calculation. A possible insult dressed up as cheer. You're not very good at it. You smile at a courtier as they pass. They don't smile back. They nod very slightly, as if trying to discourage any further facial acrobatics. Someone coughs. You're beginning to hate that sound. It always means you've done something wrong. You expected the court to be full of warm welcomes and formal niceties. It is not. It is full of people watching their own hands, their own words, and their own mouths, lest they slip and smile at the wrong syllable. There's an official tone to mirth here. The king may smile when the occasion demands. The queen may offer a half smirk, which carries the weight of law. But for you, unranked, unnamed, uncomfortably moist in your borrowed robes, a smile is dangerously close to mockery. You try a new tactic? No expression at all. Your face settles into something neutral, but now you look suspicious. A royal advisor glances your way as if trying to decide whether your stillness means hidden treason or just indigestion, and so begins your day as the facial. Diplomacy department of 1. You smile at a child safe. You nod at a steward acceptable. You accidentally grin during a recitation of ancestral mourning verses. Disaster. You're corrected later in private. A kindly eunuch, the sort of man who's seen 20 dynasties and forgotten more scandals than you'll ever commit, suggests you let the lips rest during sacred retellings. You nod. You wish your lips came with a user manual. There's a type of smile that is approved here. It involves only the corners of the mouth, no teeth, and preferably no hope. A smile of containment. A gesture of I am pleased and precisely. The way the empire requires, your natural smile is too ... hopeful, too enthusiastic, too alive. You watch a satrap greet the queen. His smile is so practiced, so precise, it seems sculpted rather than expressed. You attempt the same look in a polished bronze mirror. You resemble someone about to sneeze on royalty. Later, you overhear someone say, "He smiles like a Lydian." Merchant, you don't know what that means? Doesn't sound like praise. So you give up smiling. Mostly you focus on blinking slowly and breathing evenly and pretending your entire face has retired. And surprisingly, this works. No one coughs. No one glares. One guard even nods as you pass. Not a friendly nod, but a "you are not a problem today" nod. The highest honor. By evening, your cheeks are sore from resisting emotion. Your teeth feel imprisoned. But you haven't insulted a noble, or appeared too joyful at an inappropriate moment, or drawn attention by smiling while walking victory. Tiny, unremarkable victory. And you celebrate the only way court allows, with a faint exhale and no one noticing. You're handed the robe, your first morning in court. It is not a robe. It is a woven expectation. It's long.
Ow!
Too long, it gathers around your ankles like it's hoping you trip. A, the fabric is stiff in the wrong places, soft where it shouldn't. B, and somehow manages to itch and overheat you simultaneously. It smells faintly of incense and someone else's ambition. You expected something elegant. What you get is an outfit that feels like it's whispering you're not important enough for this. Robe, every time you move. There are layers, so many layers. Undergarments over sashes, pleated folds that defy gravity and logic. You need help putting it on. Even with help, you end up with one sleeve too tight and the sash positioned in a way that implies either insolence or marital availability. You're not sure which, but a steward fixes it with silent, practiced disapproval. You try walking. You shuffle. The robe swishes behind you like it's mocking you in fluent Persian. Why you attempt a dignified posture. The cloth pulls at your shoulder. Your left foot gets tangled. Your right one compensates. Now, you're drifting diagonally, like a suspicious ghost. A noble glides past, their robe perfect weightless, shimmering, not touching the floor even though it absolutely should. You think their robe may be sentient? Yours is actively trying to stage a rebellion. You reach for a scroll, and the sleeve unrolls over your hand like a curtain falling on a failed play. You peek around it, the queen notices. Of course she does. There are colors to consider. Blue is for nobility. It's white for purity. Gold is for royalty. Yours is beige, not the good kind. Not soft sand. More like damp papyrus. You try to wear it proudly. The robe disagrees. It folds oddly. It absorbs sweat like it's collecting evidence. You try to sit. You shouldn't have tried. The fabric bunches in strange places. A corner of your tunic slides up unexpectedly, revealing a knee scandalous. You tug it back down. Now your collar is off-center. You're one sneeze away from dishonoring 3 generations. You expected the robe to help you blend in. Instead, it singles you out, a walking symbol of good intentions and poor tailoring. Someone whispers behind you. His belt loops on the wrong side. You try not to flinch. You don't know which side it should be on. You didn't know robes had belt loops. The worst part. Everyone else seems fine. Even the cooks move gracefully. Their garments don't shift. Their layers don't rebel. One woman balances a tray of figs while turning a corner, and her sleeves float. You, meanwhile, have left a trail of wrinkles and shame. At the end of the day, you try to remove it gently. It snags. You panic. You twist. You fall. The robe wins. You fold it badly. You place it on a stool. You apologize to it. It doesn't respond, but you suspect it's still judging you. You finally make it to a court banquet, a real one, not the servant scraps or garden leftovers you've grown used to. This is a meal with silver trays, fig-laced things, and meats that look like they were once important animals. You expect joy. You expect comfort. You expect a moment of relief from all the bowing and robe-related trauma. No, this meal is a test. The first challenge is seating. You hover at the edge of the hall, waiting to be placed. No one tells you where to go. Steward raises an eyebrow. That's your cue. You guess correctly, miraculously, and slide into the proper cushion. It deflates just enough to humble you. Then there are the plates, or trays, or shallow ceremonial boats of food. You can't tell. There's one with dates arranged in concentric circles. Another with fish so finely sliced you're afraid to breathe near it. A third contains a paste that smells like regret and ambition. No one starts eating. They sit. They wait. They look at each other like predators trying not to blink. Eventually, someone, a noble with a face carved from disinterest, lifts a spoon. Everyone else moves in perfect harmony. You slightly late scramble. Your spoon clinks. Loudly. You might as well have struck a gong with your forehead. You chew. Too fast. The flavor is subtle, which is to say it tastes like damp history. You nod as if you understand it. You don't. It's probably saffron, or dust, or memory. Next to you, someone eats a grape with the deliberation of a philosopher signing a treaty. You try one too. It bursts loudly. A scribe 3 cushions away glances up. You nod at him. He doesn't nod back. The bread is dense, possibly from wheat, possibly from pressure. It's carved into triangular shapes, and you're not sure if you're supposed to dip it, sniff it, or apologize to it before consuming. You try to speak a toast, maybe. But then you remember, don't speak unless someone else speaks first. You raise your cup in vague approval instead. It's a quiet toast to no one in particular. You sip. It's sour. It's like someone fermented protocol. You expected to eat. You're mostly posing with food. Across the table, the queen moves. Just a hand. Just enough to signal something. Perhaps displeasure or digestion. A servant appears instantly and replaces a dish you hadn't even noticed. The new dish arrives covered in petals. You fear it deeply. You reach for a piece of meat. Your sleeve grazes the bowl beside it. It wobbles. It does not fall. But you can feel the tension ripple outward. A silent gasp of etiquette followed by the kind of pause reserved for watching someone teeter on social extinction. You resume chewing, slowly, quietly, as if the fate of your next posting rests on your molar's discretion. At the end of the meal, you are not full, but you are exhausted. You expected nourishment, got performance art, and your spoon is still watching you. You wake up with a sore jaw. You assume it's from stress. Or perhaps from sleeping face down on a pillow that appears to be filled with powdered limestone and disappointment. But as you stretch, groan, and glance at your reflection in a polished dish, the truth becomes clearer. You've been clenching your face for hours. Not just your jaw, your entire face. Eyebrows held in noble neutrality, lips carefully pressed into the courtly line of non-committal approval, eyelids lowered to project calm insight, cheeks tensed in a state of ceremonial readiness. You expected facial freedom. What you got was emotional taxidermy. At court, your face is not for you. It is for others to interpret, to evaluate, to misread. If you frown, you're displeased with someone important. If you look amused, you're disrespecting a law older than your grandparents. If you appear blank, you must be hiding something, so you practice in secret. The mirror hour. You call it, though it's more like 12 stolen minutes beside a brass basin that reflects your confusion with brutal honesty. You try different expressions. The thoughtful nod. The loyal stillness. The alert yet mildly pleased court servant. All feel unnatural. All begin to look alike. You wonder if your soul has migrated into your shoulders just to escape. The queen, of course, has perfected it. Her expression could be carved from polished marble and still be too subtle for most sculptors. She gives you a glance, 1 second, maybe less, and you feel like you've committed both a faux pas and minor treason. You're not even sure why. Possibly because you blinked. You try to keep your features arranged. But the air is dry, the halls are long, and human muscles were never meant to hold a respectful squint for this many hours. You catch yourself yawning once, tiny, inward. It still counts. A nearby steward turns his head as if detecting a crime through walls. You try smiling again. Just a little. Someone misreads it. You're offered congratulations on an upcoming engagement. You nod, terrified. To what? Whom? Is this how noble marriages begin? A twitch near the corner of the mouth, and a scroll sent before lunch? Eventually, you start to feel like a mask held together with fatigue and fear. You itch your nose, a gesture so human, so innocent. But in court, it could mean the tax collector must be removed. Consider a strategy. Less face, more silence. Come part of the background. Blend into the column shadows and emote only when thunder claps. Then someone says, "You have a very calm presence." Yes. You freeze. That's either praise or the beginning of a quiet exile. You nod. Slowly. The approved amount. You press your lips into the shape of respectful invisibility, and your jaw hurts again. You're not sure who outranks whom anymore. You thought it would be obvious: robes, titles, the usual symbols. But no, in the Achaemenid court, power drips from people like invisible ink, unreadable, undetectable, until you say the wrong thing. To the wrong person, and your career evaporates into a puff of ceremonial vapor. You expected a hierarchy chart. What you get is a living puzzle made of jewelry, posture, how long someone can hold a gaze without blinking. The stewards nod to the scribes unless the scribes are senior. The cupbearer bows to the queen's sister, but not to the queen's. Niece, unless it's during festival season, you bowed to a man yesterday. Today he bowed to you. You both pretended not to notice. Rank is not shouted. Rank is whispered by fabrics, by how slowly someone eats, by the confidence with which they ignore others. The more powerful a person is, the quieter their entrance, the later their arrival, and the softer their sandals. You tried walking confidently once. The room paused, not in admiration, in confusion. Someone asked, was that a message? You tripped over your own relevance. There's a man who always stands near the window. No one speaks to him. No one gestures toward him. But everyone seems to know what he wants. Just once. Who is that? Answer came back. Exactly. You have not recovered in the dining hall. Seating isn't assigned. It's assumed. You hesitated at the cushions. A single flick of a courtier's eyebrow sent you skittering to places to the left. It's like a chess piece, realizing it doesn't know how to play. You watch others for clues. A noblewoman who eats first. A steward who never makes eye contact. Guard who taps his fingers once, always once, before opening a door. You suspect these gestures are either sacred traditions or meaningless habits. And you can't afford to guess wrong. The hierarchy is like gravity. You don't see it. But trip once, and you remember it forever. You meet a man dressed plainly. You speak freely. He listens. You think you've made a friend? Hours later, someone whispers, that was the treasurer of earth and salt. You feel your organs politely collapsing. You expected to climb the ranks. You're still trying to? Find the first rung. There's a rumor that a prince once greeted a stable master with too much enthusiasm, and was later assigned to reflection duty in the eastern provinces. No one knows what reflection duty means, but it sounds lonely. You adjust your tone now, not based on merit or character, but based on how others tilt their heads when someone enters a room. You master the art of mid-conversation, deferral. You develop a new bow, not too deep, not too familiar. The I-have-no-opinions-but-am-very-loyal bend. And somehow, it works. You survive another day in the invisible maze. But you were tired, so tired. You finally learned how to stand. Not just to be upright, but to exist with the precise tension of someone who is available but not assertive. Present, but not noticeable. Decorative, but not memorable. This is an achievement. You are now invisible in the correct way you expected. Court life to be about action, speeches, decisions, gestures of power. But your greatest success has been learning how to do absolutely nothing with deliberate grace. You stand beside the doorway. You do not fidget. You do not scratch. You do not sigh. But your breath is silent. Your posture suggests a statue that's been trained in humility. When a royal enters, you lower your eyes by exactly one syllable's worth of time. You once bowed too fast. Someone assumed you were guilty. You once bowed too slow. Someone assumed you were challenging the state. Now, you bow as if you're apologizing for the existence of knees. It works. No one notices you, which means you're safe. It is strange to be proud of this. Pride here is like perfume. Best. Worn so faintly that only the extremely observant will catch it. You don't smile about your success. You simply allow your eyebrows to rest. Lunch arrives. You eat without a sound. You do not slurp, sip, or crunch. You do not pick up anything too quickly or put anything down too firmly. Your meal is a negotiation. With gravity, even your chewing is tactful. You respond to requests with nods. You acknowledge superiors with the soft exhale of someone who has mastered the art of reverent oxygen. You carry messages without speaking. You listen without reacting. You are the living embodiment of non-committal excellence. Once, a steward drops a plate. Everyone freezes. You do not move. You do not react. A nearby noble nods at your restraint. You have succeeded in doing nothing. And this earns you a silent promotion in social standing. from slightly risky newcomer to reliably passive presence. You expected success to feel louder, but here, success is indistinguishable. From furniture that remembers when to be dusted. A eunuch tells you, you're learning. You bow. He smiles slightly, then vanishes into another room. You feel like you've passed a test that no one wrote down. The day ends. You remove your robe without drama. You fold it badly, but in private. You stare at your reflection and try to recall the last time your face moved. Can't. That's probably a good thing. And as you lie down on a bed that has no cushion and smells faintly of ancient scroll glue, you reflect on what you've become, a master of restraint, a connoisseur of pauses, a person who has learned the value of never being the most interesting thing in the room. You expected glory, you got survival. And in this place, that's the highest honor available. You made it, through dust. Silence, heat, hierarchy, and robes that tried to end your career. You bowed, you waited, you unspoke things with your face. You learned the secret, that in ancient Persia, reviving was a performance in stillness. Thank you for staying until the end. If you're still awake or gently drifting off somewhere, between cushions and courtyards, I hope this journey kept you company in the quietest of ways. And now, as you lie there, you know the loop will wait once more for you. Sleep well. The gates will still be there in the morning.